When the pirates attacked the station, salvation came from the most unexpected side, from a creature that everyone considered a dangerous monster. The cloister service was a sterile, alien environment, and Raiden found a group of medical specialists standing a few meters away from the reinforced cage. Their biosecurity suits reflected the harsh light of the monastery, and the huge creature lay curled up in a corner, shivering despite its thick dark blue fur. His golden eyes flashed towards the figures watching him, and a deep growl came from his chest. Dr. Verix, a four-armed alien with reptilian features, stood in front of Raiden, towering over him by 2 feet. His scaly face was expressionless as he spoke. "This is a patient, Doctor. We have exhausted all our efforts to cure him, but he remains immune." Raiden approached the cage, carefully examining the creature. He noticed that his fur was matted and curled, indicating a recent injury. "What happened to him?" he asked. "We're not sure," Dr. Verix replied. "It was brought to us by a local species that found it in the wild. They reported that he had attacked them, but we were unable to gather any information from him." Raiden continued to study the creature, trying to determine the cause of its condition. After a few moments, he turned to Dr. Verix and asked, "Have you tried to treat him with sound or light?" "Yes, you have," Dr. Verix replied. "We've tried everything we can think of, but nothing seems to be working. It just keeps shaking and growling." As Raiden continued to observe the creature, he noticed a small red dot on its neck. He touched it gently, and the creature immediately stopped shaking. It looked at him curiously, and its golden eyes seemed to soften. Raiden smiled and said, "I think I've identified the problem with this patient. Let's try a different approach. I'm the chief veterinarian, Alara, and you were called because your eyes landed on this creature. We don't want to treat this animal, Raiden. You crossed your arms and called me here just to tell me that." I exhaled sharply, my tongue clicking in frustration. "We called you because this creature is the ultimate predator, the undisputed crown of predators of its world. He has no natural enemies, he is genetically programmed to kill." He turned to glare at the beast that was injured. Raiden raised an eyebrow. Alara hissed, "Because it's dangerous." Raiden chuckled, "No way. That's not how our most trusted mentors, whom I work with, understand. A Terak never obeys if it shows weakness. If he's desperate, it means he's even more deadly." Alara's nostrils flared, and a desperate predator is more deadly than a healthy one. Raiden frowned as he moved closer to the cage. The creature's breathing was ragged. The creature's muscles twitched from time to time, and Raiden noticed a thin trail of dark liquid running down its hind leg. It seemed like it had been injured for some time. The master of the 3 eras remarked, "No one dares to treat it. Even in its agony, it can kill any of us before we have time to react." Raiden squatted down, peering into the cage. The creature's ears twitched in his direction, but it made no attempt to attack. His golden eyes were fixed on him, but behind the simple primal rage, there was something that was almost pleading. He sighed, "It doesn't hurt anyone, it's just scared." Alara made a series of sharp clicks, which Raiden interpreted as laughter. "Scared? Teraks have no fear." Raiden replied with a shrug. "Maybe not in the way we understand it, but it's injured, surrounded, and locked in a cage. Any animal would be terrified in such a situation." He pointed to the deep wound on the creature's side. "Do you see how it positions its body? It shifts its weight from this side, as if it's going to attack." The creature let out a deep, menacing growl. Raiden kept his voice low. "I know you're hurting, but I'm here to help. Let me take a look at you." Terak's eyes narrowed, but he didn't attack. Raiden approached slowly, his voice calm and soothing. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help." Terak's growling subsided, and he allowed Raiden to examine his wounds. The creature's wounds were severe, but Raiden managed to stabilize it. Terak's eyes softened, and he let out a low, grateful whine. Raiden smiled. "You're going to be fine. We'll get you back on your feet." Terak nodded, and Raiden helped him back into the cage. A group of alien medical workers watched in awe, their faces expressing a mixture of amazement and relief. Alara approached Raiden. "I have to admit, I was skeptical, but you have proved that you are a real healer." Raiden smiled. "I'm just doing my job. I'm glad I was able to help." The creature's ears twitched, and its nostrils flared as it inhaled the air, detecting its scent. "Raiden, I bet you're in a lot of pain," he continued, keeping his tone even. "It should be scary, but I'm not here to hurt you." He reached into his medical bag and pulled out a small container. "I have something that will make you feel better." Terak's growl deepened as Raiden slowly opened the container, revealing a piece of dried meat and emergency rations that he always carried with him. He He put it on the ground and stepped back a bit. See, it's just food, no tricks. The creature hesitated, then quickly grabbed the meat and swallowed it whole. Raiden smiled. Good boy. Terak's ears flattened slightly, but not in a threatening manner, but rather as a sign of relief. Behind him, Alara stared in amazement. Of course you fed him, Raiden said. This is the first step to gaining his trust. He pointed to his injured leg. Now I have to examine her more closely. Zvir's body tensed as Raiden approached the injury, but he didn't move. Raiden quickly applied an anesthetic to the wound before conducting a thorough examination. The damage wasn't as severe as he expected, but the infection was starting to spread. You're lucky, he muttered, but you've been neglecting it for too long. Severus exhaled with a hint of annoyance directed not at Raiden, but at himself. I know, Raiden grinned. Getting hurt is a real pain. He worked diligently, cleaning the wound and applying an antibiotic patch. The massive creature remained motionless, occasionally twitching its tail. When Raiden finally sat down, he met Terak's gaze. The golden eyes were no longer filled with fear or anger. They were curious. Raiden smiled, seeing that it wasn't that bad. He stood up and turned to Alara, who was staring at him as if he had just defied the laws of physics. What were you saying? Asked Raiden. Alara's mouth opened and then closed. He exhaled sharply. You're either the bravest fool I've ever met or the luckiest, Raiden. Alara shrugged his shoulders. A little bit of both. Perhaps the Terak made a low, rumbling sound, not a growl, not a threat, something closer to gratitude. Raiden chuckled. I think we'll get along great. The problem with treating a massive, genetically perfect predator wasn't just the immediate danger of turning into a chew toy. That was the consequence. After Raiden finished treating Terak, he looked at him with an unreadable look, and then immediately collapsed on the floor of the monastery and refused to move. This is a predicament, Alara grumbled, keeping a safe distance from the open cage. Raiden, hands on his hips, was recovering. That's what patients do. Alara pointed his clawed finger at the beast, which was spread out like a large, battle-torn dog. He's staying here. The animals don't linger, Raiden. They go into the wilderness to heal. They don't stay in the presence of others. Well, Raiden said, gesturing vaguely, it seems this one makes an exception. Alara let out a low growl of frustration as he paced around the other alien medical workers. Even when the creature was dozing, none of them wanted to test Raiden's obvious magical ability to not be torn apart. We can't keep him here, Alara said. Alara turned to him. Because it will be imprinted on Raiden. I'm sorry, this is going to happen. Alara made a throaty sound of annoyance. Teraks don't form social bonds with other creatures, but on rare occasions, his claws clenched in annoyance. When a Terak is treated during a time of great vulnerability, it can perceive the person responsible as part of its territory. Raiden felt a sudden feeling of emptiness in his stomach. Are you saying that he considers me part of his territory now? Alara's expression darkened. I'm saying that if it's imprinted on you, it won't leave you one step. Raiden slowly turned to look at the massive beast, which was still resting, but now one golden eye was ajar, watching him. Oh, Raiden muttered. This is a new development. Alara threw up his hands. That's why we don't treat them. Raiden exhaled. Okay, let's not panic. Maybe he's just resting. Alara gave him a deadpan look. Maybe he decided that you are now his neighbor in the den, and will start attacking everything that threatens you. At that moment, a sharp sound echoed through the monastery, signaling an alarm throughout the station. A disembodied voice, crackling slightly through the speakers, spoke in a formal tone. Terak, now completely alarmed, slowly stretched out, a sinuous movement that made every alien in the room recoil. He turned his head towards Raiden, then stood up. Alara let out a terrifying whisper. He's free. Raiden raised both hands in a soothing gesture. No one is moving. The Terak came forward, its massive paws almost silent on the metal floor. Golden eyes froze on Raiden's pupils, narrowing for a very long moment. The room was plunged into silence, then, without a single sound, the creature carefully pressed its massive, fluffy head against Raiden's chest. Alara made a strangled sound. Raiden hesitated, then slowly and carefully he raised his hand and placed it on the creature's thick fur. It didn't flinch or growl, it just stood there, as if confirming something to itself or Raiden. Raiden muttered, Well, I guess that settles it. Alara took an unsteady step back. You can't be serious. Before Raiden could respond, another blow shook the station, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. The doors of the monastery swung open, and a security officer, bleeding from a wound on his arm, stumbled in. "Pirates!" he gasped. "They're boarding the station." A distant explosion cut him off. Terak's ears jerked forward, and he made a low, menacing sound. Ilara tensed up. "We need to evacuate." "No," Raiden said, his instincts kicking in. "We have to help." Ilara looked at him with disbelief. "Help against the armed invaders?" Raiden turned to Terak. The mighty predator stood tall, its head held high, muscles tense, its golden eyes fixed on the source of the noise. He was fearless. Raiden exhaled. "Well, if I'm part of his territory now, let's see if it works both ways." He took a step towards the door, Terak following him. "You can't plan." But Raiden was already moving after him. Terak let out a deep, rumbling growl, and then, silent as a shadow, tracked him down. Ilara groaned. It's crazy, but he followed him too, because for the first time in his life, he saw something more terrifying than a wounded predator. He saw a predator who chose his side, and he was going to remind everyone why he was the top. The air in the hallway was heavy with the smell of ozone and burnt metal. Alarms blared, turning everything into a flickering red light. Raiden moved quickly, crouching low, his heart pounding, but not from fear, but from the utter absurdity of the situation. Behind him, the Terak moved with alarming silence, its massive paws sliding across the station's polished floor as if it were hunting prey in its natural habitat. His golden eyes were fixed forward, his ears twitching at every distant sound. Ilara was panting and falling a few steps behind, either from exertion or pure worry. Raiden couldn't tell. "This is crazy," he muttered. "We have to run away," he gesticulated wildly towards Terak. "Whatever it is, listen," Raiden whispered, pressing himself against the bulkhead. "The security forces are outnumbered. If these pirates gain control of the station, not only us, but everyone will be in danger." Ilara's hands clenched in frustration. Raiden peeked around the corner, and 3 armed figures in incongruous combat gear were moving down the hallway, inspecting the rooms. Their weapons looked like they had been found, but lethal coil guns are probably non-standard plasma rifles. He turned around, lowering his voice. "I went out there, and they saw an unarmed human veterinarian. They became self-confident, and he pointed out the truth of nature." Ilara stared at him. "Was that your plan?" Raiden shrugged. "I have a better plan." Ilara opened his mouth, then closed it, exhaling sharply. "I despise people." Raiden chuckled. "You will live." Before Ilara could object, Raiden stepped out into the hallway, raising his hands in the universal gesture of surrender. The pirates' weapons clicked. "Who?" Raiden said, keeping his posture relaxed. "I'm just a doctor." One of them, a bulky alien with segmented armor covering his limbs, tilted his head. "Which doctor?" Raiden smiled. "The one that keeps you alive." "Mostly." The second pirate, a slender insect-like creature, was chirping with merriment. "Then it's a bad day for you, Doctor." The third pirate, a humanoid, rough-looking one, grinned as he took a step forward. "I like people," he said, his voice hoarse. "They're easy to deal with." "About that." Raiden paused, taking a deep breath. The shadow moved after him, and Terak walked out of the corridor like a nightmare made flesh. The pirates barely had time to react before Terak let out a sound so deep and primal that it reverberated off the walls. The humanoid pirate fired first, but it was a fatal mistake. The shot barely left his weapon before the Terak moved. One moment he was behind Raiden, the next he was on top of the pirate. There was no struggle, no fight, just a quick and smooth movement. Claws flashed, a muffled scream, and then silence. The second pirate let out a terrifying screech and ran away. Terak threw himself out, covering the distance with one unnatural leap. He didn't even have to kill. With one punch, the pirate was sent into the wall, unconscious, before he hit the ground. The third pirate tried to escape, but he failed. In less than 5 seconds, the hallway became quiet again. Ilara came out from behind the shelter, looking pale. Raiden exhaled, looking at Terak. His fur stood on end, but he turned his head in his direction. "Wait, good Raiden," he said to Terak, letting out a soft sigh. He pointed to the destruction. "That's why we're not fighting them." Raiden ignored him, stepping over the fallen pirates. "We have to get to the control center. If they've already taken over the station's systems, we're in serious trouble." Ilara made a strangled sound. "We already have problems," he said, but Raiden was already moving. Terak came up behind him, his tail twitching. Ilara groaned and followed him. The central hall was in disarray. The security service made decent efforts, but it was obvious that they were suppressed. A dozen bodies lay scattered on the floor, some moaning in agony, others completely motionless. The main control panel was still functioning, but four heavily armed pirates were on guard. Raiden crouched behind the maintenance console, watching the scene. Alara was kneeling next to him, seemingly deeply regretting every decision that had brought him to this moment. Terak looked at him with concern. Pirate Alara, his eyes sparkling like gold, glanced between the two of them as he exhaled. "What's your brilliant plan now, Raiden?" he asked. Raiden was considering the same plan as before, but on a larger scale. Alara looked like he was about to rush into the airlock. Raiden adjusted his posture, took a deep breath, and then walked straight into the central hall. The pirates reacted instantly, their weapons aimed at him. "Stop," one of them barked. Raiden raised his hands. "Calm down, I'm just a doctor without a weapon." The leader, a tall, scarred alien with cybernetic implants, tilted his head and asked, "What exactly are you doing here, doctor?" Raiden smiled shyly. "Would you believe me if I said I was lost?" She chuckled, "No." Then she raised her weapon. Raiden sighed. "That's what I thought." The beast struck like a force of nature. He was moving so fast that the pirates barely had time to react. Before two of them were already down, the third fired a crazy shot that harmlessly reflected off the reinforced plate. The beast collided with the fourth. The pirate pinned them down with one powerful paw. The leader staggered back, her eyes wide with amazement. In the background, Raiden stepped forward, brushing the dust off his jacket. "I would give up if I were you," he said. The leader glanced between Raiden, Terak, and her rapidly diminishing options. Slowly, she lowered her weapon. Alara entered the room, his eyes wide open, looking between the wreckage and Raiden. "You," he breathed. "I don't understand people." Raiden smiled, moving to the control panel. "You're not the first one to say that." He pressed a few buttons, activating the station's security override. "It looks like we're safe. The security service can handle the rest." Terak approached him, breathing in the air. Without warning, he pushed his massive head into his shoulder. Alara looked like he wanted to die. Raiden reached out and scratched Terak's ears. He let out a satisfied rumble. Alara looked like he wanted to die. Raiden chuckled. "I told you it was just a scare tactic," he said. Raiden chuckled after the pirates' attack. He heard Alara grumble and say something in his native language, which was probably not very flattering. The security service has now regained control of the station after conducting a thorough search for survivors and assessing the extent of the damage. Injured personnel are being transported to medical facilities, and alarms have been silenced. Station administrators are already beginning the lengthy process of writing reports that are likely to remain unread. Raiden stands near the control center with his arms crossed as the security officer, a muscular reptilian with a missing horn, grunts as he scans data on a tablet. "Let me understand," the officer says. "Have you, a civilian veterinarian, decided to take matters into your own hands?" He points vaguely at the central hall, still filled with unconscious or moaning pirates who used the Supreme Terak to board the train. "Yes, Alara," Raiden shrugs, standing a few feet away from him, letting out a long, pained sigh. "Say it again slowly, and listen to how crazy it sounds." The officer snorts, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're lucky it worked. We had 3 squads trapped when the station blocked them. That was your job, Raiden." He gave me a thumbs up. Pirates love hacking into security systems, but they hate it when you redirect doors to lure them into storerooms with supplies. The officer exhaled. "You're either a genius or a madman." "A little bit of both," Raiden said. There was a heavy thud next to him. Terak lowered himself, watching the interaction with sharp golden eyes. The officer took an unsteady step back. Raiden scratched Terak's ears. The massive predator let out a low, satisfied rumble, leaning against the touch. Alara hid his face in his hands. "She's mine now," Raiden said casually. The officer blinked. Alara raised his head, looking hunted. "He's imprinted on it, or he's on it, either way, he won't take a step away from it." The officer looked between them, then at the massive, battle-scarred predator, now happily accepting the head-scratching. "The station's policy states that dangerous wildlife must be kept in a temporary holding area." The officer said that wildlife should be kept in a temporary holding area. Raiden raised an eyebrow. "Will you be the one to tell her about it?" The officer opened his mouth, looked at Terak, and then wisely closed it again. Alara groaned. "This is a disaster." Terak raised his head and let out a soft huff that Raiden found almost funny. "I do not know. I think it's a victory." Alara threw up his hands. "Do you even realize what you've done? Zvirus is a solitary creature, but you've turned him into some kind of pet." Raiden tilted his head. "So you're a human being." You shouldn't be able to tame a top predator. Raiden grinned, gently stroking Terak's thick fur. It's funny about people. We tend to make friends in the strangest places. Alara let out a frustrated sob. The officer shook his head, clearly deciding that this was no longer his problem. Okay, fine. Just don't let him eat anyone. Raiden gave her a thumbs up. The officer walked away, leaving Raiden to stare after him. Are you really going to leave him, Raiden? The officer asked. Raiden shrugged his shoulders. Well, he seems to like me. Do you think I could get rid of him if I tried? As if to emphasize his point, Terak stood up, stretched, and then gently pushed his massive head into Raiden's side. Terak made a peculiar sound. Raiden laughed. 2 days later, Raiden was half asleep at his desk in his cramped rooms. He felt a warm breath on his neck and opened one eye. The Terak he had started calling Shadow was curled up in a corner, watching him with sharp golden eyes. She was healing well. The wound on her side closed, and her movements became smoother. She began following Raiden everywhere, much to the chagrin of the station residents. Even the security teams have learned how to handle both of them. Are you hungry, Shadow? Asked Raiden, yawning. The Shadow snorted and put its head on its paws. I'll take that as a no, he said, leaning back in his chair. On the ceiling, he came to work with rare alien species, trying to treat creatures that no one else understood. Somehow, he ended up with Terak as his personal bodyguard. Life was strange. Ben looked at the Shadow and said, You know, Alara says you should be more like this. The Shadow twitched an ear and grinned. I think you just like proving people wrong. Terak closed her eyes and exhaled. Stretching, she said, Yes, me too, Shadow. She let out a soft, contented rumble, and for the first time in a long time, Raiden felt at home.